Confronted my roommate's boyfriend about his snoring. He exploded with rage, and now I'm terrified to return home. My roommate, Claire, has been a good friend of mine since college. We've always gotten along great, and living together has been mostly smooth. The issue is her boyfriend, Mike. Now, don't get me wrong, Mike is a decent guy and I actually like him, just not as her boyfriend. It's one of those weird dynamics where, individually, they're fine, but together, they seem completely mismatched. Their relationship is a carousel of silly fights and constant petty annoyances, and it's honestly baffling. My weeks are insanely busy. I juggle a full-time job, I'm a full-time grad student, and I try to squeeze in some hobbies when I can. Basically, I'm home to eat, shower, and sleep. Early bedtimes have become my lifeline. But our apartment is small, and since Mike works nearby, he is at our place almost every night. I won't say it hasn't been a source of irritation, because it has. But since I'm barely there, I just let it go. No sense making waves when you're only around to crash. However, there's one glaring, unforgivable problem: Mike snores. Not just gentle forest breeze snoring, but earthquake level, log sawing, foundation rattling snoring. It's so loud it could wake the dead. Most nights, I manage to drown it out with Netflix or a podcast, and I tell myself to let it slide. But last night something inside me just snapped. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, exhausted and furious. I could actually feel the bass of his snoring vibrating in my own chest. I marched over to Claire's bedroom, opened the door, and said as calmly as I could, "Hey Mike, sorry, but you're snoring super loud." That was it. I didn't go off on him. I know people can't really control snoring, and being overweight doesn't help. I just needed a few hours of silence. The snoring stopped, and I thought that would be the end of it. This morning, I woke up to the usual empty apartment. Claire gone off to work early, Mike usually passed out. I tried to relax with some breakfast and lunch prep, just zoned out in my own little world. But then Mike shuffled into the kitchen. I was surprised to see him up and tried to keep things light. "Good morning, sunshine," I joked. He exploded. Not just annoyed, screaming at me, full volume rage. He called me a bitch, accused me of being rude and condescending, and then said I was disrespectful for waking him up last night. Apparently, me making breakfast in my own kitchen is now some heinous offense because it woke him up? I froze. He's a big guy, and Claire's mentioned before that he has a temper, so all I wanted was to get as far away from him as possible. I grabbed my stuff and got out of there. Now, I have absolutely no idea how to handle this. I'm staying late to do homework, but really, I just don't want to go home at all right now. The idea of trying to talk to Claire about it has my mind all jumbled. I can't even figure out where to begin. How do I approach this without making everything 100 times worse? Update 1. I got a lot of heat for entering her room without knocking. Come on, it wasn't like that at all. I literally did the 2 to 3 courtesy knocks, opened the door just 3 inches so I could say something, and left, immediately. I didn't storm in to yell at them or anything. Honestly, I barely even crossed the threshold. If I hadn't opened the door a crack, her boyfriend wouldn't have even heard me. And let's be clear, she's one of my best friends, not some stranger I found on Craigslist, so this wasn't an extreme breach of privacy. Trust me, I'd tried everything. I attempted earplugs, but I can't sleep with them, they're so uncomfortable. The only way to make someone stop snoring is to wake them up, and since I wasn't sharing a bed with him and couldn't physically tap him, this was all I could do. After months of dealing with it, night after night of sleepovers with our third roommate who doesn't even pay rent, I was beyond fed up. I've tried the passive things, texting, accidentally knocking the wall. I've tried it all because the snoring was just that bad. He knows he snores like a freight train but doesn't bother with nose strips or anything to tone it down. Look, I get that snoring is hard to control, but what am I supposed to do if I can't sleep? So, I stand by what I did. No, I'm not super rude for courtesy knocking and slightly opening my close friend's door to let her boyfriend know, yet again, that his overstayed welcome snoring was keeping me up. That was just the reality I was dealing with. Anyway, the good news is I've got a very positive update. Things moved pretty fast because, frankly, this was getting urgent. I ended up staying super late at work to finish some homework, which was actually a blessing in disguise. Not only did I get a ton of work done, but it also gave me time to cool off, collect my thoughts, and figure out the right way to handle it. I decided to call Claire because texting just seemed too complicated for what I needed to say. I asked if we could talk about something when we got home, but she told me she already guessed what I was going to bring up, which made me nervous, honestly. I told her I didn't want to have the whole conversation on the phone, but I asked her to hear me out. I explained exactly what happened and told her, "Look Claire, I love you to death and I want you to be happy, but I can't have Mike in our home. He really scared me this morning." The moment I said that, she started crying and asked me to come home right away. So I did. I left work immediately and headed straight home. When I got there, she told me that Mike had texted her earlier saying weird stuff about how we got in an argument. We definitely didn't. I barely said a word, and claiming I was somehow out of line. She was going to text me about it, but knew how busy I was and planned to talk when I got home instead. Once she realized how bad things really were, she felt awful. Apparently, he's been really verbally aggressive with her, too. She's mentioned his short fuse before, but I had no clue things had gotten this bad. Hearing all that made me break down crying, too. I love her so much, and it just crushed me to hear how much she's been hurting. She totally agreed that Mike had overstayed his welcome but admitted she had no idea just how much it was affecting me, mostly because I never told her. I'd just been bottling up my anger instead of being truthful about it. I'm glad that didn't turn into a thing between us, though, because as soon as she got the full picture, we were totally on the same page. She knew she wanted out of the relationship. This was just the final straw. We spent the next 2 hours hashing out a plan for how she could safely break up with him and get out. I'm really grateful we were able to talk so openly, and that she felt safe confiding in me about all of this. I had no clue how unhappy she'd been. There'd apparently been a lot of yelling and hardly any happiness left. Since it was her first serious relationship, she'd been convincing herself that this was just how it gets after a while. She'd been hiding it from me because she knew I'd worry, which, yeah, of course I would, but I wish I'd known. She decided she'd meet him in a public place to break up, and I told her I'd support however she needed. She asked if I could drop her off and pick her up afterward. I was nervous about potentially running into Mike or making things awkward, but if that's what she needed, I was there for her. So, last night, I dropped her off down the street from a coffee shop and ran errands nearby, waiting for her call. After an hour, she rang me. She sounded totally fine. I picked her up a block away and we went home. She said it went way better than expected. He actually felt bad, which blew my mind. He even admitted things weren't working, and although he tried to plead his case, she wasn't having it. I was genuinely shocked by how calm and reasonable he was. Honestly, her situation was 1,000 times worse than my own snoring nightmare. I'm not holding out for any apology, nor do I care to get one. Still, just in case, we notified our landlord about what happened, just as a precaution in case Mike ever tried to come back and cause drama. I truly, sincerely hope that never happens, but better safe than sorry. The biggest relief is that she's okay, and I no longer have to lose sleep to his snoring or his craziness. Last night, I slept like a baby for the first time in months and plan to do the same tonight. Communication really can solve, or at least end, a lot of issues. Update 2. So apparently it went way better than expected. Had an expiration date of about 36 hours. The quiet was so delicious that first night I almost forgot he existed. Then 2 days later, right as I'm about to get into bed with my sleepy time tea, there's this heavy, deliberate knock at our door. Not a neighbor knock. A cop knock. Claire and I just look at each other. She checks the peephole and mouths, "It's him." I could literally hear my pulse in my ears. She texts him, "Now isn't a good time. We agreed on Saturday to get your stuff." He responds by knocking again, louder. Then he tries the handle. We hadn't changed the locks yet because we were waiting for our landlord to swing by, but thank every deity we deadbolted. Claire started shaking. He says through the door, super even, "I'm calm. I just want to talk." She replies, "You can text." He goes quiet for a second and then, "I swear to God," he says, "you won't even hear me. I got something." We both stare at the door like it's about to sprout teeth. He knocks once more, waits, and then we hear footsteps going down the hall. We both exhale at the same time. I'm mid-whisper, "Do we call?" when my phone starts blowing up with unknown FaceTime calls. Decline, decline, decline. Then a text from Claire, "He just sent me a video." We sit on my bed and watch it on mute first like it's a jump scare. It's him, in his car, proudly unboxing a CPAP machine in his lap like it's a PS5. He straps it on and gives a thumbs up. Then he sends a second video to both of us with sound. It's literally him filming himself breathing quietly and then he types on the screen, "See? Problem solved." My hand was shaking, but I typed, "This isn't about snoring." Claire sends, "Please don't come over unannounced again." He replies immediately, "Okay." Saturday. We put our phones on Do Not Disturb, pushed a chair under the knob because that felt like doing something, and camped out on my floor with a lamp on like we were 9. I don't think I blinked for an hour. Morning comes and for 5 beautiful minutes everything is normal. I make coffee. Sunlight. Birds. I open the door for a second to grab my grocery delivery and there's a small brown paper bag neatly hooked over our handle. Inside, a molded pair of industrial earplugs, a single-serve chamomile tea packet, and our key. No note, just the key on our shared house keychain. I felt relief and ew at the exact same time. Claire took a picture of the bag, texted him, "Drop-offs aren't okay," and he actually apologized. Was trying to be nice. I wanted to crawl out of my skin. Our landlord is a saint. I texted him the picture and asked if he could come that day. He rearranged his afternoon and showed up with a rekey kit and a drill. While he's changing the cylinder, he goes, "You girls want a top latch too?" "Yes. Please lock us in like we're guarding the crown jewels." He installed that swing bar thing and even showed us how to keep the door chained while we check. We offered to pay. He waved us off and said, "Consider it a Christmas present and also a selfish desire to never deal with drama in my building." Fair. We still had to get his stuff out, which felt like inviting a raccoon to a picnic and hoping it behaves. Claire asked if his friend could come instead. He said no, he'd be respectful. So we set the plan, Saturday midday, daylight, her brother on FaceTime in the living room, me home. I moved anything that was his, 2 hoodies, a toiletry bag, 3 mismatched socks, and his dumb neon gaming controller, to the hallway so he wouldn't have to step inside. I even put them in a tidy pile like a concierge. He showed up exactly at noon with a bouquet of supermarket roses, which I took and handed back through the crack of the door like we were doing hostage negotiations. He kept trying to lock eyes with Claire. "You look pretty," he says. She says, "Thank you. I wish you the best." He takes the bag, the hoodies, the controller, and then points past my shoulder to the wall clock. "That's mine," he says. I laughed before I could stop myself because the clock is literally shaped like a cat and has been in our apartment since the day we moved in. He goes, "You bought it because you liked mine." Claire deadpans, "No." His jaw did that tight thing and for a second I saw the switch flip, then it flipped back. "Fine." He stepped back. For the first time since all this started, I exhaled. I wish that was the end. It wasn't. Sunday night, Claire is in the shower and I'm on the couch half asleep when my phone starts pinging with Venmo notifications. Mike is sending me $5 with the memo for earplugs over and over. 4 separate payments. I hit request to send them back and write, "Please stop contacting me." He cancels them and then, like clockwork, a number I don't have saved calls. I answer because I'm thinking it's work and a woman whispers, "Hi, is this Claire's place?" It's his sister. She says she's sorry for bothering us, but Mike showed up at their mom's house crying, and she wants to know if Claire will talk to him so he doesn't spiral. I felt my spine turn to ice. I told her kindly that we're not available and that he needs to lean on them, not us. She apologized again and hung up, and I went and sat on the bathroom floor and told Claire through the steam. She wrapped a towel around herself and said, "No." Monday we walked to the precinct and made it formal. Nothing dramatic, just told them what happened, showed the videos, the bag, the Venmo thing. The officer took a report, gave us an incident number, and explained how a no trespass letter works and how to call if he shows up again. It felt like putting a seatbelt on. We also emailed our landlord to put in writing that Mike isn't permitted on the property and he replied within 5 minutes that he'd noted on our file. And then the weirdest, pettiest coda, today I get a package at work with no return address. Inside is a pristine copy of a book called The Sleep Revolution and, tucked in the back cover, a MetroCard loaded with $20. No note. I did a full body eye roll, put the book in the office freebie pile, and went home and had a very grown-up dinner of cereal with Claire on the couch while we watched the dumbest rom-com we could find. She looked at me halfway through and said, "I feel like I can breathe again." I told her, "Same." We changed the locks. We set the boundary. The only snoring I hear now is my humidifier when it needs a new filter. And for the first time in months, when I turn off my lamp at night, it's just quiet. No bass line coming through the wall, no adrenaline spike, no waiting for the next knock. Just quiet, which, after all that, feels like winning the lottery. Update 3. For about 3 days it was boring in the best way. I relearned what the apartment sounds like at night, radiators hissing like old ladies gossiping, the upstairs neighbor's cat dragging a toy like it's committing a crime, my own heartbeat not trying to jailbreak out of my throat. Then Tuesday morning my phone buzzed with a notification I'd never seen before, AirTag found moving with you. I thought it was a glitch. I don't own any Apple trackers. I held my phone out and Claire leaned over, hair in a towel, mascara wand mid-air. We both went very still. "Play sound?" I whispered, because apparently you have to whisper when your phone thinks you're being followed. I tapped it. Somewhere in our apartment, faint but unmistakable, something chirped. The two of us turned into raccoons in seconds. We went room to room, stopping to hit play sound like it was a Geiger counter. Chirp in the hallway, louder near the hooks. Louder still over her tote bag. She dumped everything onto the runner, wallet, gum with exactly 1 stick left, a ponytail holder she swore she lost last fall. Nothing. We hit play again. There's the chirp, high and smug. I ran my fingers along the seams of the tote and felt something a little raised under the leather key tag she keeps clipped to the strap. Not the keys we actually use, our old house key on our cute shared keychain, the one he left in the bag hooked over our door. Under the leather tag, someone had zip-tied a white coin. Not the size of a quarter. The size of I'd like to throw up now. Claire put her hands on the counter and breathed through her nose in a way that made me want to wrap her in a blanket and also tear the drywall down with my bare hands. We didn't argue about what it meant. There wasn't anything to argue about. We put the AirTag in a Ziploc with the cereal we weren't going to be able to eat now and walked back to the precinct, with our incident number like we were showing a teacher that yes, the bully did shove us into a locker. The same officer from before recognized us and gave us that sympathetic head tilt people do when you hate being on the receiving end of a sympathetic head tilt. He had us airdrop the screenshots of the alert and took photos of the little white disc. There's a serial number on the back, he wrote it down. He explained that they can't get the owner info on the spot, but they can include it in the report and request details from Apple. He also brought over the DV officer and suddenly we were sitting in a quieter room while someone very competent explained orders of protection in plain English and even plainer steps. I texted our landlord from the bench. "Found a tracker in the key he left," I wrote. He replied immediately, "I'm printing your no trespass letter for the vestibule and the super. I'll be at the building this afternoon." The man might actually be an angel in Carhartts. Claire signed the petition for a temporary order like she was signing her name in a yearbook and handed it back with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. We Ubered to the courthouse because neither of us had it in us to do the subway, and I watched her stare out the window like she was trying to memorize what trees look like when they aren't blurring past you at panic speed. It took hours, lines, metal detectors, a waiting room full of crying strangers and a toddler who gave me a conspiratorial high five, but by mid-afternoon a judge signed a piece of paper that said, in very official fonts, he wasn't allowed to contact her, or show up at our apartment, or send his sister to do it for him. Our building's address is now a protected location. They gave us multiple copies. I tucked one into our silverware drawer because that's where I put things I don't want to lose, and another under the sugar, because that felt like the most poetic spot for no. On the way home, my phone buzzed with an email from our landlord forwarded from his inbox. Subject, authorized occupancy. It was Mike, asking to be added to our lease as a courtesy since I've contributed to the household. He included a screenshot of a $100 Zelle he tried to send our landlord with the memo January utilities. I laughed out loud in the Uber in that unhinged way that makes drivers glance at you in the rearview. Our landlord had already declined it and responded with a sentence that started with "You are not a tenant" and ended with "Any further attempt to enter the property will be reported." He CC'd us and, for good measure, attached the no trespass notice on letterhead. I wanted to send him a fruit basket, or a key lime pie, or a key that actually does nothing except help you remember who's on your side. By dinner time we had a Ring peephole camera installed, courtesy of our landlord's afternoon surprise. I'm here with the drill again. He showed us how to download the app, and then he put his hand on the top of our doorframe and said, "You two need anything else?" Claire said, "A flamethrower," and he smiled without smiling and said, "How about I put the building-wide notice up so the neighbors know he's not allowed in?" Done. We sat on the couch facing the door like it was a TV and ate rice straight from the pot because neither of us could figure out plates. When my phone rang with an unknown number, I answered because my brain is broken and still thinks it could be work. It was the DV officer. They'd called him and gone over the order, he'd acknowledged it, and they'd let him know about the serial number on the air tag. He tried the "it was for their safety" line. The officer didn't repeat what she said back to him, but the tiny pause before he's been advised was the most satisfying silence I've ever heard. The next morning brought the kind of pettiness that used to piss me off and now just rolls off me like water. There were 3 voicemails from an unknown number with complete silence for 15 seconds and then a click. The intercom buzzed at lunchtime with a food delivery we didn't order. We didn't buzz anyone in. A neighbor texted us a screenshot from the building WhatsApp of a guy matching his description loitering outside earlier. The landlord stuck a copy of the order of protection in a sheet protector in the vestibule like a menu. The move from rom-com to cop procedural is not my favorite genre change, but we're managing the script. There was one bright, petty star in the middle of all this. We decided to rearrange the living room because apparently reclaiming a space sometimes looks like shoving a couch across hardwood while yelling left left like you're docking a boat. We unplugged the television to move the console and found a little USB stick that definitely wasn't ours wedged behind the surge protector. My stomach tried to fall out through my feet. We bagged it and added it to the little evidence basket we've unexpectedly curated next to the microwave, AirTag, printouts, the Sleep Revolution book with a sticky note marking the chapter on healthy boundaries because I have a sense of humor that survives apocalypses. The officer added it to the report the next morning and told us we're officially their most organized case this week. Great. Horrifying. Love that for us. By Friday afternoon, the paper had been served and that weird hum in my bones turned down a notch. We texted her brother a photo of the order so he'd have it, and he wrote back, "Proud of you." Claire cried in the Trader Joe's snack aisle because we were buying salsa without calculating if a man who doesn't live with us would eat it all, and then I cried because she cried, and then we laughed so hard a woman by the frozen peas said, "I'll have what they're having," and we said, "Medical freedom," and she nodded like she understood. There was one last hiccup that felt like the universe trolling me specifically. At 2 a.m., a single chirp, I sat straight up, grabbed my phone, ready to hunt another beep. It was the hallway smoke detector begging for a new battery. We took turns on the step stool, me holding a mixing bowl over my head as a helmet because I'm drama, Claire ripping open the plastic on a 9-volt like she was defusing a bomb. We got it swapped and stood there at 2 in the morning in our socks, sweaty and bleary and weirdly proud. When we finally crawled back into bed, the only things I could hear were the radiator, the cat upstairs committing a tiny felony, and my own apartment settling around me like it meant it. No knocks. No gifts with strings. No breathing performed like theater. Just a very quiet, very boring kind of safe. I forgot how loud that is when you've been bracing for a while. It was so loud I fell right asleep. Update 4. I really thought we were done trying out for the worst crossover episode ever. Part domestic comedy, part procedural, part sleep hygiene infomercial. Apparently, the universe said we had one more act. Wednesday morning my phone rang with that special kind of official calm that makes you stand up without meaning to. The detective from DV called to say Apple had responded. The AirTag was registered to his Apple ID. He actually read it out loud like he was reading the winner of a raffle. Serial XYZ belongs to Mike's iPhone. Would we be willing to sign a supporting deposition for stalking/harassment related to the tracking and the repeated, serenades by doorbell? Yes. Put pens in our hands and tell us where to write. We walked to the precinct with coffee we didn't taste and signed our names so many times I started practicing different fonts just to keep my brain entertained. Claire's signature got tiny and determined. Mine kept turning into a doctor's note for a field trip. The detective explained what happens next in that slow, steady voice people use when they're putting a blanket around a shocky person. Paperwork. DA intake. Maybe an arrest, maybe a desk ticket, definitely a paper trail thicker than a phone book. He thanked us for being very organized, which is a nice way of saying we now have an evidence basket next to the microwave like it's part of the decor. We did the adult thing and went for bagels afterward. I was midway through demolishing a sesame with chive when my phone buzzed. He's here. From Claire. Not here. Her work. Everything slowed down and sped up at the same time. She works front desk at a place with a lobby and a security guard who likes to critique our outfits like a supportive aunt. We'd already given them a copy of the temporary order and his photo because Newest believes in redundancy like it's religion. Claire texted, "He's at the desk asking for me, says he has legal papers." I called her while I was already paying and moving. She whispered, "I'm in the back. Security won't let him up." What I did in that moment was purchase a second bagel because apparently my fight or flight also includes carbs. What security did was perfect, told him he's not allowed on the premises, asked him to leave, called the non-emergency police line with our incident number. He tried the brand new "but this is public" line, which would be funnier if my hands weren't shaking. I stayed on the phone while she breathed like a marathoner behind a filing cabinet and we listened to the guard narrate under his breath. "Cops just walked in. Okay. Nice and easy, pal." 2 officers escorted him out a few minutes later while he did that rubbery resistance thing toddlers do when they don't want to be picked up. Claire texted, "They cuffed him." Then, "I'm okay." I sat down on a church stoop and cried into my second bagel in a way that made an old woman walking her corgi pause and fish a tissue out of her pocket like we were in a Nora Ephron movie about municipal law. DV called an hour later. He'd been processed on the order violation. Because the world is nothing if not consistent, he wasn't going straight to jail forever. He got a desk appearance ticket and a very serious conversation about consequences. There would be a court date. They had him on the air tag now, too. "This is the kind of record that matters," the officer said, and the relief I felt was ugly and joyful and complicated. 2 days after that was our hearing to convert the temporary order into a longer one. Family court, gray carpet, chairs that make everyone sit like they're waiting for their turn at the DMV of feelings. The waiting room was full of tired bravery and toddlers with snacks. Claire squeezed my knee so hard I thought she'd leave a fingerprint. He showed up in a button-up he'd ironed into submission and a tie that didn't know where it was supposed to be. He did not look at us. His sister sat 2 rows back, small and folded in on herself like she wanted to be helpful and also invisible. When our case was called, we stepped forward with our stack of papers like valedictorians of "No, thank you." The judge had the kind of expression that can hear your whole story before you open your mouth. The court attorney asked if there were any updates since the petition. Claire said, clear and steady, "He came to my job," and handed over the copy of the incident report and the still from our ring that our landlord had printed with the date and time stamp like a wedding photo from hell. He tried to say the air tag was for our safety again. The judge lifted one eyebrow so slowly I felt it in my soul. "Sir," she said, in a tone that could ice a volcano, "you do not get to track a person who has told you not to contact them to make sure they are safe." He opened his mouth and closed it. He tried I was delivering legal paperwork. The judge looked down at the order, then back up at him. "There are acceptable methods for service. Violating a standing order is not one." Then she turned to Claire. "How long do you want the order for?" Claire said, "As long as possible," and her voice only cracked on the last word. The judge signed 2 years, full stay away, no third-party contact, no workplace, no residence, no digital breadcrumbs that point in our direction. She read it out loud like a spell. We walked out into sun so bright we both squinted like moles and bought pastries that looked like they belonged at a child's birthday party. Claire took a bite of a cupcake so aggressively a man at the next table smiled into his coffee. We took a picture of the order on the table between us like it was a new plant we were trying not to kill. In the middle of all this, the detective called about the little USB we found behind the TV. "You ready for the least dramatic answer possible?" he asked. "Yes, God, please." It was empty. Just a dumb thumb drive, brand new, no files, no ghosts, no murder PowerPoints. The relief hit so hard we laughed, bent over, gasping. It still went back in the basket like a weird trophy, but at least it's a blank weird trophy. The retaliation we got after court was almost quaint by comparison. 2 emails to our old joint address we never used with subject lines like final closure and bodies that said nothing. A LinkedIn request from a profile with his middle name spelled wrong like a child wearing his dad's shoes. One last delivery of flowers that our doorman rejected with the practice flick of a wrist that said, "Buddy, I've been in New York since Giuliani." We forwarded it all to DV and didn't reply. When you have a piece of paper that says you don't have to explain yourself anymore, not explaining yourself becomes a hobby. We also did some annoying grown-up things that felt like exorcisms. New phone numbers. New email aliases for bills. Claire bought a $12 steel mailbox hasp online and our landlord laughed and installed a prettier one for free because he seems to get high on making our door look like a bank vault. I put our old key, The one on the cute shared keychain that he slipped the tracker onto, into a mason jar with salt like we were brining it. I don't know what that does, but it made my spine settle by one notch. There were still little flares of adrenaline that made us jump at shadows. The first time the ring pinged after court, we both froze. It was our neighbor standing there with a plate of banana bread and a sticky note that said, "For the girls in 4B. We see you." I almost cried into the loaf. We gave her back the plate the next day with 2 slices of our dignity and a thank you note that tried not to be a manifesto. The last ridiculous, necessary bow on all of this came Friday night. I was using the bathroom when I heard a click and a software in the hallway. My brain did a full body sprint. I hopped out with shampoo in my hair like a rabid sea urchin and found our landlord kneeling by the baseboard, installing a tiny metal box by the door. "Door alarm," he said, like a magician revealing the dove. "Doesn't go to the police or anything. Just makes a sound if somebody tries the latch." He tested it and the beep was so hilariously polite I snorted. "I can make it louder," he offered, and we both said, "Too fast, yes." That night, the radiator sang, the upstairs cat committed a petty misdemeanor with what I think was a Nerf ball, and the door made no noises except existing. Our phones were quiet. Our ceiling did not pulse with someone else's lungs. Claire fell asleep on the couch with a book open on her chest and an empty bowl of cereal balanced like a crown, and when I woke up at 2 to move it before it became modern art, I just stood there and listened to our apartment be a boring, ordinary container for our lives. Update 5. The universe woke up on Saturday and decided to try federal law on for size. I was making pancakes that looked like continents I couldn't identify when something slid under our door with a whisper. Not a flyer. Not a takeout menu. A white envelope with a tiny eagle in the corner and all the energy of this is not a coupon. I picked it up and felt my stomach do jazz hands behind my ribs. United States Postal Service, confirmation of change of address. For Michael, last name. New address, our apartment. I laughed in the way you laugh when you're so tired your cells get silly. Claire read it twice and then folded it back along the crease like she could make it smaller. The letter had that bland cheerful tone government mail uses, like, "Congratulations on your new adventure." As if our adventure wasn't trying to keep our mailbox from being an evidence shoot. I texted our landlord a photo. He called immediately and said, "Post office first. Then me." So we put on assorted sweatshirts that said nothing about how ready we were to commit crimes and walked to the branch 2 avenues over with our very official folder under my arm and the order tucked in front like a shield. The post office on a Saturday morning is a very specific circus. A toddler crying over stamps. A man trying to mail something that might be a bowling ball. A woman in a leopard coat who could have been a judge in a previous life sighing with her whole skeleton. We waited our turn under fluorescent lights that made me feel like I was a different species. When we got to the counter, the clerk read the letter, read the order, and went from "What can I do for you today" to "I am a dragon guarding this gate" so fast I wanted to put her on our Christmas card list. She tapped her acrylic to the glass twice like a gavel and said, "Hold on, let me get my supervisor." The supervisor came out with the energy of someone who understands the power of a stamp. We explained in short sentences. She took the letter, took the order, took 2 copies for the carrier and the case, and said the most soothing sentence I've heard all month: "We're flagging this as fraudulent." Then she leaned over the counter conspiratorially and said, "You'll probably get a call from the postal inspector. Keep everything." I nearly hugged the plexiglass. I did not. I am a professional adult. I cried behind my mask and said, "Thank you so much," like I was proposing marriage. We left with receipts that were really just extra slips of paper and instructions to write "refused, not at this address" on anything that showed up with his name. We also filled out a form with boxes that wanted our blood type and favorite childhood snack, name, address, order of protection number, a short description, under a sign with an eagle so official it felt like it could arrest you. On the walk home I had the petty, sparkling thought I haven't had since we filed at the precinct: this part of the mess is federal, and somewhere a new file with his name just got a sticker that says "Why would you do that?" Between the post office and our door, the ring pinged. I tapped the live view and there he was on the vestibule camera feed from downstairs in a neon safety vest and a baseball cap like he was about to fix a transformer or start a band. He had a clipboard. Of course he had a clipboard. He pressed the building buzzer and looked up at the camera like he was making eye contact with a god he didn't believe in. The building WhatsApp lit up. Maintenance? Anyone expecting Con Ed? Our landlord was in there before I could type. No scheduled maintenance today. Do not buzz any unverified vendors in. You could feel the neighbors' hackles rise through text. We forwarded the clip to DV with the subject line "costume party" and kept walking until we were in our apartment with the door chain on and the new little beep box glowing its polite blue. 10 minutes later, the DV detective replied, "Costume doesn't supersede a court order." Noted. The phrase "noted" has never felt more like a hug. We added the change of address letter to the evidence basket next to the microwave like it was a weird centerpiece and tried to reorient our brains toward pancakes. 10 minutes after that, the doorbell downstairs did its best impression of an opera singer. We didn't answer. A minute later, our tenant thread updated with a photo from Mr. 2C who has the swagger of a man who grew up with 4 sisters. He'd taken a picture of the vestibule. Our landlord had printed the no trespass and the protection order again and this time put them in plastic and tape like they were school projects. He also added a new page, building policy, no unscheduled vendors, do not admit. If you've never felt protected by a laminated sign, I highly recommend it. Because absurdity loves company, the cake topper on this little scene showed up in our mailbox that afternoon as a different kind of official envelope. City Civil Court. We both stared at it like it might hiss. Inside, a small claims summons. Michael, last name, V, Claire, last name, and, my name. Amount claimed, $275. Reason, cost of CPAP, earplugs, and defamation of character. I read it once, blinked, and then read it out loud in a British accent like maybe if I added theater it would make more sense. Claire reached across the table and circled defamation with a pen, then drew a tiny cat next to it to stop herself from doing crimes. We called the DV detective and faxed, yes, faxed, like we were dialing into 1997, the summons to the little number she gave us. Civil court is its own track, she said. He's allowed to serve it through the court, unfortunately, but the order still stands, no contact. You can appear and ask for dismissal. Send me the outcome. So Tuesday at 10 a.m. we joined a Zoom full of people holding their phones at their foreheads and learned more about the human condition than any MFA ever gave me. The judge had a plant behind her that was leaning toward justice. A man in another box was trying to settle a fence dispute while his dog intermittently burped at the camera. He popped on in a button-up from the same shirt family as the court day, with a new energy, frustrated paralegal in a sitcom. He tried to talk to us. The judge, who had already read the petition and our order, said, "Sir, you will address the court." He tried to argue that the CPAP should be returned even though it was never in our possession, which the judge clarified with the kind of stare that boils water. He said defamation like he was ordering pasta. She asked him to articulate the defamatory statement. He said they told people. She asked who? He said, people. I watched the exact moment her patience packed its purse. She said, very clearly, this is dismissed. The court will not be used to perpetuate contact in the face of a protective order. Then she muted him and you could see his mouth moving with no sound and the little red microphone icon like a tiny guardian angel above his name. I took a screenshot of that square and we framed it with our minds. On our way down from the adrenaline cliff, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize, and the voice on the other end introduced himself as an inspector with the United States Postal Inspection Service. He had the cadence of a man who has seen things and believes in paperwork. He asked me to confirm our address, Claire's name, the dates of everything we'd flagged. He thanked us for providing the copy of the order and said, "We've reversed the change. Your carrier's been instructed to return anything in his name. If you receive anything else addressed to him, write not at this address and hand it back. We'll open an investigation into whoever submitted the fraudulent request." He said investigation like other people say brunch. I thanked him 17 times. It is a very specific kind of bliss to be told your problem is interesting to a new branch of law enforcement. The day decided to throw in one more theme, competence from strangers. Claire's boss popped his head around her desk and said, "We updated our security SOP to include your order by the door, and the front desk staff have your photo and his photo taped to the underside of the keyboard." The security guard snapped me a photo later of the little setup, a laminated copy of the order, a highlighter, a piece of tape. It looked like craft hour at a very stern summer camp. By evening, I wanted to go outside and stand on the sidewalk and clap for the Postal Service, the judge, our landlord with his drill happiness, and the security guard who calls us kiddo even though we pay taxes. Instead, I did the domestic witchcraft that calms my nervous system. I cleaned our silverware drawer and found 2 rubber bands and a takeout sauce packet from a place that doesn't exist anymore. I put the small claims printout in the evidence basket on top of the Sleep Revolution book and tucked the postal letter under it like strata in a petty geology. It was almost uneventful after that, which felt like being reborn. Almost. At 9 p.m., the building thread pinged with a photo of him on the corner, still in the safety vest, staring at his phone with the deep concentration of a man trying to look like he has a reason to exist where he was. Our landlord replied to the chat with a simple already called. Stay inside. 5 minutes later, we heard sirens somewhere not ours and then nothing. 10 minutes after that, a text from the DV detective, responded. Advised again. Incident noted. The word again did something soothing and ugly in my chest at the same time. We celebrated our brush with bureaucracy with what passes for romance now, grilled cheese cut on the diagonal and a documentary about mushrooms that made us feel safe, for an hour. Halfway through, there was a knock. My soul tried to leave in a vest. It was 3B holding a Pyrex of baked ZT like an offering. For the girls in 4B, she said, and then, quieter, we see you. I blinked hard enough to move mascara and handed her back a Tupperware of cookies that looked homemade even though they weren't. Community is when your neighbor shows up with carbs and doesn't need any more details. The petty epilogue kept up its rhythm the next morning. Another official envelope with the eagle. This one was addressed to us and said, "This letter confirms cancellation of the change of address request." I put it on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a tiny orange because sometimes you have to decorate your life with proof that things can go your way. The landlord texted a photo of a new metal plate he'd put over our mailbox slot so nothing could be slipped under the door, riveted, shiny, an armor plate for paper. He captioned it, "For your piece of mail, and I forgave him immediately for the pun because he is single-handedly making our home into a fortress that still somehow looks cute. 2 days later, the postal inspector called back with what I swear was a smile in his voice. We traced the submission. It was done online from an IP associated with his address, using a debit card with his name for the identity verification. He coughed a little laugh and said, he picked a bad area to play in. The words picked a bad area gave me the kind of petty joy that tastes like freezing a spoon. He told us to consider a P.O. box if we ever wanted to route anything separately and to continue sending him copies of anything weird. I asked if we could bake him a cake with a tiny fondant eagle on top. He did not say no. The last scene in this week's episode was, blessedly, only dramatic if you zoom in. Another AirTag found moving with you notification, and my body did the sprint, but the chirp led us to the toad of a girl in the laundromat whose face went from terrified to embarrassed in 5 seconds. Oh my god, I'm so sorry, she said, lifting her backpack with a little white coin clipped right there. We all laughed in that shaky way former hostages to noise laugh. I showed her how to mark it as found and we all went back to folding in the piece of a problem that was not ours. And then, because the apartment likes a callback, at 2 a.m. the door alarm let out one single polite beep that shot me upright. We were back to the mixing bowl helmet choreography on the stepladder, Claire unscrewing a little gizmo like she was removing a curse. Battery replaced. Gestures repeated. We stood in our socks in the hallway at 2 in the morning, breathing like we hadn't been holding our breath for months. The radiator hissed like a gossip. The upstairs cat committed a misdemeanor with a ping pong ball. The only mail that made it under our door was the stuff we wanted. The only case we dealt with was a case of seltzer someone delivered to the wrong floor. I keep catching myself listening. For knocks. For sighs. For the universe trying to put a laugh track under our lives. And what I hear, most nights now, is a silence made of 100 people doing their tiny jobs right, judges and inspectors and landlords with drills, neighbors, with ZT, security guards with laminators. The snoring bass line is gone. The hum under everything is just our own, ordinary, boring lives. Which, at this point, feels like the fanciest thing I've ever owned.